So I walked into the theater expecting to watch a pink comedy about a plastic doll, and I walked out having witnessed the most faithful retelling of the book of Genesis ever put to film. And before you click away thinking I've lost my mind, hear me out, because what I'm about to show you will completely change how you see both stories forever. I've spent a lot of time diving deep into biblical allegory, and after rewatching Barbie 4 times, I really wanted to map out every single parallel between these two narratives. And the connections aren't just surface level, they're so precise, so intentional, that by the end of this video, you'll be convinced that Greta Gerwig either has a theology degree or accidentally stumbled into creating the most profound spiritual allegory of our generation. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 7 major parallels that prove Barbie isn't just entertainment, it's scripture for the modern age. But first, we need to understand why this comparison isn't as crazy as it sounds. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button for me. Here's something most people completely miss about both stories. Both Genesis and Barbie begin with the exact same premise: intentional creation by a divine figure who makes beings in their own image. Let me break this down. In Genesis, God creates the cosmos from chaos, culminating in humanity made in God's image. Now look at Barbie. Ruth Handler, the real-world creator of Barbie, literally appears as a godlike figure who created Barbie Land as this perfect plastic utopia made in humanity's aspirational image. But here's where it gets interesting. Both creators have the same motivation: love. God creates humans out of love, wanting beings who can choose to love him back. Ruth Handler created Barbie out of love for her daughter, wanting to give girls a doll that represented limitless possibility. Now I know what you're thinking. This guy's reading way too much into a movie about toys. But stick with me, because this parallel goes deeper than you think. Both stories start with perfection. Genesis gives us Eden, a paradise where everything is provided, there's no death, no suffering, no want. Barbie Land gives us the same thing, a world where every day is perfect, everyone is beautiful, there are no real problems, and Barbie literally floats down from her dream house every morning without a care in the world. But here's the crucial detail that most people miss. Both paradises are built on innocence. Adam and Eve don't know they're naked. They have no self-consciousness, no shame, no awareness of imperfection. Similarly, Barbie has no concept of cellulite, flat feet, or existential dread. She just exists in blissful perfection. But as we all know, perfection never lasts. Things need to change to grow, and we need experience to be able to understand. Every great fall from grace needs a catalyst. Someone or something that introduces doubt into paradise. In Genesis, it's the serpent. In Barbie, it's Weird Barbie. Now, before you laugh at me for comparing a snake to Kate McKinnon, think about their function in the story. The serpent doesn't force Eve to eat the fruit, it simply asks questions. Did God really say you shouldn't eat from this tree? You won't die if you eat it? You'll become like God, knowing good and evil. Weird Barbie does the exact same thing. She doesn't force Barbie to leave Barbie Land. She simply presents the choice. You can go back to your regular life, or you can know the truth about everything. She's literally offering Barbie the fruit of knowledge, much like the red and blue pills in the Matrix. Both the serpent and Weird Barbie are outcasts from their perfect worlds. The serpent is cursed to crawl on its belly, and Weird Barbie is the damaged, played with too hard version that doesn't fit the perfect aesthetic anymore. But here's the brilliant part. Both figures represent the same thing: the uncomfortable truth that perfection is an illusion. The serpent tells Eve that God is keeping something from her. Weird Barbie tells Barbie that her perfect world is built on a lie. Most people think the serpent is evil, but what if I told you that both the serpent and Weird Barbie are actually the heroes of their stories? They're the ones offering freedom from ignorance, even though that freedom comes with a terrible price. And that price? The complete destruction of innocence. Which brings us to the most crucial parallel of all. This is where both stories become identical in the most haunting way possible. In Genesis, Eve eats from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The moment she does, everything changes. She becomes aware of her nakedness, feels shame for the first time, and suddenly understands mortality, suffering, and the difference between right and wrong. In Barbie, our protagonist has what she calls thoughts of death, literally the same awakening. She becomes aware of her flat feet, her imperfections, and suddenly, the perfect world around her feels fake and hollow. But here's what's brilliant about both stories. The fall isn't portrayed as entirely negative. Yes, there's loss of innocence, but there's also the gain of authentic existence. Think about it. Adam and Eve in Eden weren't really living. They were existing in a state of perpetual childhood, never growing, never choosing, never becoming fully human. Similarly, Barbie in Barbie Land wasn't really alive. She was a perfect doll going through perfect motions in a perfect world that ultimately meant nothing. The scene where Barbie first experiences existential dread describes the moment Adam and Eve first felt shame. It's the exact same emotional journey, the terrifying but necessary transition from innocence to consciousness. But here's where the stories diverge in the most fascinating way, and it reveals something profound about how we view gender, power, and free will. The fall in Genesis is often blamed on Eve. She's the one who took the first bite of the apple. It was her who tempted Adam. But in Barbie, the fall is portrayed as liberation. Barbie's awakening isn't a mistake, it's growth. What if I told you that Greta Gerwig is actually offering a feminist reinterpretation of Genesis? What if Barbie is showing us what the fall looks like when it's not filtered through thousands of years of patriarchal interpretation? Because what happens next in both stories will determine not just the fate of the main characters, but the entire structure of their worlds. But here's where Barbie gets really deep, and most people completely miss this layer. Will Ferrell's Mattel CEO isn't just comic relief, he's what ancient Gnostic texts called the Demiurge. And if you don't know what that means, you're in the right place, let me explain. In early Christian mysticism, the Demiurge is a false god, a creator who thinks he's the ultimate authority, but is actually just a middle manager in the cosmic hierarchy. He creates material reality, but mistakes it for the ultimate truth. Sound familiar? The Mattel CEO literally believes he controls Barbie's reality. He thinks he can force her back into the box, back into her predetermined role. But here's the thing. He's not the real creator. Ruth Handler is. He's just the corporate machine that's taken over her original vision. Watch the scene where the Mattel executives chase Barbie through their corporate headquarters. This is the moment when false structures of power come crashing down. Notice how the Mattel building is this sterile, fluorescent-lit maze? It's the opposite of both Barbie Land's colorful paradise and the real world's messy authenticity. It's corporate purgatory, the false reality that pretends to be in control. This is where Barbie becomes a critique of late-stage capitalism. The Demiurge doesn't create, he commodifies. He takes Ruth Handler's original vision of female empowerment and turns it into a product to be controlled and sold. He's literally trying to put consciousness back in a box. The box also a symbol of the material world, which when unfolded becomes the cross. In Genesis, after the fall, humanity encounters the same thing. False authorities that claim divine power, but are really just systems of control. The Pharaoh who enslaves the Israelites, the kings who claim divine right, the religious leaders who burden people with rules instead of offering freedom. But here's what's brilliant about how this connects to our Genesis parallel. After the fall comes the exile, and this is where both stories become road movies. In Genesis, Adam and Eve are cast out of Eden. They can't go back. They have to wander in a world that's suddenly harsh, where they'll experience pain, death, and the struggle to survive. But here's the thing. They're finally free to make real choices. In Barbie, our protagonist is essentially exiled from Barbie Land. She has to journey to the real world, our world, where everything is complicated, messy, and painful. But just like Adam and Eve, she's finally free to discover who she really is. Watch how both stories handle this transition. In Genesis, the first thing Adam and Eve do is make clothes. They're literally creating their new identity. In Barbie, the first thing Barbie does in the real world is get catcalled and experience the complexity of being a woman in patriarchal society. Both characters are learning the same lesson. Knowledge comes with responsibility, and freedom comes with consequences. But here's something I realized on one of my viewings that completely changed how I see both stories. The exile isn't punishment, it's graduation. Both Adam and Eve and Barbie are being promoted from childhood to adulthood, from innocence to wisdom. Think about it this way. Would you rather live in a perfect world where you never grow, never choose, never become fully yourself? Or would you rather live in a messy, complicated world where you have the freedom to become who you're meant to be? Both Genesis and Barbie argue for the second option. They're both stories about the necessary loss of innocence in order to gain authentic existence. But there's one character whose journey shows us the dark side of this awakening, and it reveals something crucial about how consciousness can be corrupted. Here's where Barbie does something that Genesis only hints at. It shows us what happens when the other half of creation chooses a different path entirely. While Barbie's journey to the real world is about gaining wisdom and consciousness, Ken's journey becomes about gaining power and control. And this is where the movie becomes a devastating commentary on how patriarchy corrupts the very concept of masculine identity. Think about it. In Genesis, Adam and Eve fall together, but they face the consequences as partners. In Barbie, Ken and Barbie fall separately, and Ken's response to consciousness isn't wisdom, it's domination. When Ken discovers the real world, he doesn't learn about mortality, complexity, or authentic relationship like Barbie does. Instead, he learns about patriarchy, a system where his worth is defined by power over others rather than connection with them. He literally comes back to Barbie Land and tries to recreate the worst aspects of our world. Watch how Ken transforms Barbie Land into Kendom. It's not just role reversal, it's a perfect mirror of how patriarchal systems corrupt paradise. The Barbies, who were once empowered and autonomous, become accessories to Ken's identity. This hit me hard because Ken's arc is actually the story of how masculinity gets twisted in our culture. Instead of learning to be authentically himself, Ken learns to perform dominance. Instead of growing into wisdom, he grows into control. This is like Cain and Abel, the first story after Eden, about how consciousness can lead to jealousy, competition, and violence. Ken becomes Cain, consumed by envy and the need to prove his worth through dominance over others. But here's where Ken's story becomes hopeful. By the end of the movie, Ken realizes that patriarchy didn't make him more masculine, it made him less human. His real journey isn't about power over others, but about discovering who he is when he's not performing dominance. He has to learn what Barbie already knows, that consciousness means choosing authenticity over control. And this brings us to the most profound parallel of all, the nature of creation itself. This is where Barbie becomes not just a retelling of Genesis, but a commentary on it. In Genesis, God creates humans with free will, knowing they'll eventually choose to disobey. It's the ultimate creator's dilemma. Do you make beings who will always obey you, or do you make beings who can choose to love you freely even though they might choose to leave? In Barbie, Ruth Handler faces the exact same choice. She created Barbie to be perfect, but when Barbie gains consciousness and wants to become human, Ruth has to decide. Does she force Barbie back into her perfect plastic existence, or does she let her daughter creation choose her own path? And here's where Barbie does something that Genesis doesn't. It shows us the creator's perspective with complete compassion. When Ruth Handler appears as this godlike figure, she doesn't punish Barbie for wanting to leave paradise. Instead, she blesses her choice. This is revolutionary. Most interpretations of Genesis focus on God's disappointment or anger at humanity's disobedience. But Barbie suggests that maybe the creator always intended for their creation to grow beyond the original design. Maybe the fall was always part of the plan. Watch Ruth Handler's face when she gives Barbie the choice to become human. It's not anger or disappointment, it's pride. It's a parent watching their child take their first steps, knowing they're walking away from you but celebrating their independence anyway. And here's the most mind-blowing connection. In Genesis, the serpent promises Eve, "You will be like God, knowing good and evil." Most people see this as the ultimate temptation, the lie that leads to the fall. But Ruth Handler literally delivers on this promise. She tells Barbie that she can become her own creator, her own God. This reframes everything. What if the story of Genesis isn't about humanity's failure, but about humanity's graduation? What if God, like Ruth Handler, always intended for us to grow beyond innocence into wisdom, beyond obedience into authentic relationship, beyond creation into becoming creators ourselves? And that brings us to the choice that defines both stories. Both stories end with the same choice: return to innocence or embrace the complexity of authentic existence. In Genesis, there's always been this promise of return, the idea that someday humanity will find its way back to Eden. But what if that's missing the point? What if the goal was never to go back, but to go forward? Barbie makes this explicit. At the end of the movie, Barbie has the choice to return to Barbie Land and resume her perfect plastic existence, or to become human with all the messiness that entails. And she chooses humanity, and a check-in with her gynecologist. Barbie doesn't rewrite Genesis to mock it. She rewrites it to finish the story. Not, once upon a time, there was a woman who disobeyed, but once upon a time, there was a woman who asked why and became real. So maybe the fall wasn't a fall at all. Maybe it was the first step toward becoming fully alive. Let me know what you think of this comparison in the comments, and if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks.